into consideration. I want to start off by saying that this presentation by you really reveals many of the things that we have heard and we have seen ourselves in oversight visits. So there honestly is naught for our comfort in this presentation. The issues that concern me very deeply is, first of all, the fact that we sent our troops on missions, such as the SAMI DRC, without the necessary equipment. And I fully understand what the troops in the DRC coming back said, that they felt that they were abandoned, because they were, in terms of the experiences that I've seen, also what I've heard from soldiers who came back, abandoned. Not just at the moment when M23 was overrunning the areas where they were, but I think long beforehand. Because it was right from the beginning that they arrived in that mission without the necessary support, and also without the necessary backup. They knew that when they end up in trouble, that there will not be the ability to extract them from the areas where they were, and therefore they were delivered. Now, we went through all of this when we were assessing what was happening after that dreadful situation in early 2025, when 14 of our young soldiers lost their lives. And there were promises also made by the South African National Defence Force. And I'm very glad that the chief of the SANDF is here today, because they said, look, we will do our own assessment, and finally you will get a report from us about what has been happening and how we see the situation and why it has happened as it has happened. Now, my worry is that we've not received that report. That there had been information to us, yes, we've done the various interviews with the soldiers who's returned, but where is the final findings and report? Because I would very much love to put that report next to what you've said and make comparisons. Not for the sake of attacking the SANDF, but for the sake of understanding also where the command structure of the SANDF found themselves when they deployed the troops under the circumstances that they did. What you gave us is these very personal experiences of the troops and how they experience the situation. In terms of the mission, for instance, for SAMI DRC, there was massive confusion about that mission. Even the leadership, the command of the SANDF presented confused assessments of what their mission were. When we were faced with the problem that we lost 14 soldiers, there was an attempt, even in the presentation to the Joint Standing Committee on Defence and the Portfolio Committee on Defence and Military Veterans, to call it a peacekeeping mission. It never was. If you go and look at the definition of what it was with SADC, it was an offensive mission in order to support the government of the DRC. And under those circumstances, a very different approach had to be followed. And if there was not clarity amongst the commanding officers about what the mission was, you really delivered your troops to an impossible situation. I also picked up that there was a lot of problems between our deployed troops and the forces of the DRC. There was no trust. In fact, on an intelligence level, there were huge problems. At one point, the president of the DRC even said some of the SANDF intelligence people have to go because we don't trust them, which again meant that our forces were exposed. Now, yesterday afternoon, evening, President Ramaphosa announced that the operation together with the United Nations, the peacekeeping mission, is now being withdrawn from by South Africa. And there was a one sentence in there, in order for us to be able to get our own house in order. Now that, for me, was not just one sentence. It was a huge acknowledgement that we were not ready to participate in SAMI-DRC, nor were we ready to participate in the UNESCO mission. I don't think it is a bad thing that we're withdrawing our troops from that peacekeeping mission, as much as I believe and my party believe that peacekeeping is important in Africa. But it is problematic when that peacekeeping is taking place under the current conditions as your report had presented to us, because that means we send our soldiers in to die. We expose them not just to physical death, but to severe emotional and psychological trauma. I want to conclude, Chair, with the issue of the announcement of President Ramaphosa about internal deployments. I understand why the President made that announcement. And my political party came out immediately after that announcement was made in the SONA saying we support it. Not because we believe it is the first line of action that needs to be taken to deploy the SANDF, but because there is a tacit acknowledgement in that announcement by President Ramaphosa that the South African Police Service has failed us. This is not on the back of a positive development, it's on the back of failure, both operational failure and, I think even more important, intelligence failure. Because we don't have the intelligence to be able to fight the gangs and the drug networks here in the Western Cape and also in Gauteng. And I hear what you say, that if we get the SANDF deployed on internal deployments, it is critical that we must understand the core mandate, that there must be a limited deployment, that there must be an overhaul of internal training. And I sincerely hope that it will be possible. And I would like to hear also from the command of the SANDF and the chief of the SANDF who is here, to do internal training of those soldiers, even if it's short courses, before they are deployed. And the legal frameworks have to be very, very carefully formulated, because we've seen the problems of deployment of the SANDF during the COVID period. So, while we support as a critical measure because of the crisis that we are in and the failure of the South African Police Service to do its job, there is an important issue which you raised on how you do that deployment and what kind of support you give to the soldiers who get sent into civilian areas. And then my very last comment is on the issue of border protection. Very critical, but again, we saw during the oversight that we as a committee had to the borders. Our soldiers are not properly trained to do the job, but more significantly, they don't have the equipment. You quite correctly point out they use antiquated equipment, sometimes against some very sophisticated operators. So the need to get the proper equipment and also to need to get the proper troop carrying vehicles and all of that is absolutely essential. And I want to raise my concern that once again, during the last couple of months, we had presentations about tenders that went out for troop carrying equipment, for troop carriers that were not adequate, that was not field tested by the people who will have to use that equipment. And under the circumstances, one starts getting concerned that this very legitimate need that our forces on the border have is being utilized for all kinds of tender shenanigans. And the SANDF must be very careful, Arms Corps must be very careful about it, because our troops need the necessary proper equipment and also the necessary technical and information equipment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Nihas. Honourable Kotze.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to you for the presentation. I think, especially after the President's announcement last night, it's very insightful, and maybe I'll just start there. When you say that we need to resolve the core mandate of conflict, are you saying that because it's now been accepted that these kind of deployments, whether it is to old mines or disaster relief, that they inevitably will happen, and that we must kind of work with what we have and rather prepare for it to be safe? So, you know, and also perhaps, you know, what role this committee can play in that kind of rules-based establishment. I must say I was incredibly hard hit again by the feedback from troops to say how they experienced their leadership as tone deaf and arrogant. And I remember during those terrible months, January, February, March last year, how the SANDF continuously held golf days, how generals shopped for new luxury vehicles, some of them even 2 Audi Q7s. And I can imagine what this looks like for somebody stuck in torrential rain with no real equipment. And so I think the one thing you didn't mention, and perhaps, I mean, you know, there was the issue about allowances. And in a way, and I've raised it on several occasions in this committee, and I've written to the chairpersons of this committee to say, but, you know, there was a parliamentary question answered, a question I asked, it was answered by National Treasury, to say that a relatively large amount of money was made available to pay these allowances. And this committee, not once in a whole year now, has called the minister to come and account as to what has happened to the money. The allowance issue has still not been resolved. So, in as much as this session today is incredibly helpful, it's very insightful, I think we as a committee have a lot of work to do. Because at the end of the day, it's the troops, the people who have to go out. They have to go out now into the Cape Flats. I mean, anybody who lives on the Cape Flats will tell you, I mean, even a hardened and skilled troop will have to have their wits about them. I mean, these gangs don't just, you know, they don't plan their next victim. They just shoot and then they ask questions. So thank you very much. If maybe you can just give a little bit of clarity on that. You made a very interesting comment, and perhaps you can repeat it. I got it in my notes as the moral dilemma against using combat force against your own citizens. And if you could just remind me again who said that and what the context was. I thought it was it's very pertinent. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable. The moral hazard, yes. Honorable Priet.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to Prof and Colonel Doctor for the presentation. I think, as my colleagues have said, to have seen and to have spoken to our soldiers and to actually have what we've seen in a report, proving what we've seen and proving our summations. I spoke to a family member of mine who was at the airport when our troops were deployed to Mozambique at the end of last year, or was it 2024? Our years flow in one. And I remember them telling me of our soldiers crying and saying, we are going on a death mission. We've greeted our families for the last time. And I think this has highlighted that fact and has enforced that. Chairperson, I would maybe, because I have a few comments, but I would like to get to my questions first, is there an in-depth report of this presentation? Because I think it be pertinent that it be sent to this committee, because, Chairperson, as you and myself were talking outside, I think we as a committee, and I think Honourable Gottsal said it now, we need to take this seriously. We hear that faith in government, in the DOD, in their leaders, but also in Parliament is low. And I think we have, as the JSCD, has a responsibility to critically evaluate this report and to make the necessary recommendations. But more than that, Chairperson, when we come to the recommendations of this report, after this committee has done its work in this regard, I think we need to set clear timelines as well. And I would like to make the suggestion that we maybe sit with National Treasury and look at what can be done. 2 weeks ago, we were at, and I specifically remember being in Langebaan at the Air Force, where they mentioned that resources and equipment is horrific, and they specifically said what nobody realizes is aviation inflation is 15%. So even though you want your aeroplanes to fly, you want your machines to operate, you cannot, and then cannibalism of your vehicles that are already standing then happen. So I think that be pertinent, Chairperson, that we look at that and that we have a tracking mechanism and then keep DOD to account to ensure that these things happen, because we have a responsibility to our citizens, to our soldiers, and as our oversight responsibility. Chairperson, I want to ask with regards to, and I know we spoke to, it was to people in service now, but there is a big problem with our military veterans as well, in terms of pension funds, in terms of medical aids being depleted now, and we're seeing that they are now suffering. Was there specific mention, or these soldiers that are exiting, do they have a fear of, and as Honourable Gottsal also mentioned, that there's not their allowances, but further than that, when you retire, your pension, your medical aids, and also would you look into something like that? And what is, I'm interested to hear the thinking or the worry around that, because we're sitting at a place where government cannot afford that anymore, and these people who have served our country are now having to be reliant on family members and have to stand, sorry for the Afrikaans word, maar hulle moet bakkant staan. And I don't think that's right, Chairperson. And then also maybe just to make mention of that, we spent 370 plus rand on an Armed Forces Day, but our officers don't have the proper boots and the proper clothing. And then we need to look at whether we are prioritizing correctly or not, because as we've heard, and we've got the proof now, our men and women are being left alone. Chairperson, what I think is very important as well for this committee is that we need to look at these recommendations, and I would like to see the in-depth recommendations as well, because I think with regards to SONA and what the President said, I think we as this committee, and then allow me to be a bit naughty and say, but the GNU who are sitting here need to talk and take it to the President about how we are addressing those internal deployment mandates, because I get why we're doing it, but that emphasizes the lack in other parts, and we need to address that. So, Chairperson, I think this committee as a joint committee needs work in terms of not just us, but maybe a joint justice and security cluster communal committee to sit and see how we can address and how we can make recommendations to address the shortfall that was highlighted by SONA and has been proved by this report. Thank you, Chair. I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Honorable Shalembe.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And the good thing is that I'm the last person to speak. Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think, the presentation that has been, presented to us surely is giving a true reflection of what, is happening. And based on the experience, what happened to our soldiers in the DRC, and based on experience we have when we were meeting with the soldiers, who survived, the shooting or the killings, in the DRC. And, Chair, I think because the first thing that one is looking at is that what is the mandate of the SANDF in terms of our Constitution. I think the most important one is the protection of our civilians and also the protection of our territorial integrity and the protection of our republic. Now, if you look, in the staff establishment in the SANDF, we are supposed to have at least maybe 75,000 soldiers that we need to have. But currently, we are far less from that, which means now we are unable to protect, our citizens go to the borders, how pouring they are. And we cannot deny the fact that now it's like now we are going to experience, a violence between the illegal, foreigners who are within our country and ourselves, because the pouring is continuing and nothing is much that is being done to address the issue of our borders. And once, on the other side, we prioritize the deployment, to other, to externally, forgetting the main object of, our Constitution that we have. Now, I was just looking, to the issue, say now, right now, the President announced that there's going to be this deployment. Can we confirm that, the equipment and the vehicles that, are going to be used are in good condition to ensure that while, our soldiers are defending, at the same time, they are protected? Same, if, we look, at the international peacekeeping agreement, I don't think, there's something forcing us to say we must deploy, externally if we do not have the capacity. We should not, pretend as if we were a big brother when it comes to defending, whilst knowing exactly that, we do not have that capacity. And, Chair, I think, if we can, adhere to these recommendations, and I'm happy that, the Department of Defense is here, and I think they cannot deny the fact that, we have a problem when it comes to capacity, which may be linked to the underfunding to the Department of Defense. So maybe up until we have that capacity and we have, the department has been funded, maybe you can consider maybe going outside. It's very, very, disturbing that this report is coming after we have lost the lives, in the DRC. I think that will be taken into cognizance that we prioritize, ourselves before going outside. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Shalembe. Honorable.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, the two presentations are confirming what we heard when we visited Limpopo. And my only interest now is to hear the response of the Chief of Sandf on what has been said here. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable. Honorable Plugis.
Chair, sometimes we make the mistake to think that the SNDF are deploying themselves to these missions, and our attack becomes to the defense force, which they are not deploying themselves. They are implementing authority and instruction and order. And I think I want to start on that note. Secondly, Chair, I appreciate the presentation, but as my Honorable Carl Nias and also now Honorable Hala have raised, I would have liked for us to have another session, Chair, as to where the defense is now bringing their side of the story, and we compare and we make proper recommendations as a unit to wherever the deployment is coming from. Because that will help, as Honorable Priet is saying, that it will help us in our duty as the lobbyists and advocacy structure to say to the people that have the power to deploy, when you deploy, take this in consideration before you do it. Make sure you have the right resource. Make sure that our defense force are ready to do the deployment. All of the things that is recommendations here, we should actually engage with it when we get the other side of the story, so that we bring it together, make proper recommendations in moving forward, Chair, so that we don't find ourselves again when deployment happens, we are not ready. We don't have the right tools. We don't have the right training. So all of those things, let me make that recommendation. Let us get, as the Defense Force have said to us in many previous meetings, that they are also working on the report. They will bring the report to us, give it to us, and also with the recommendations. And I think we bring these two research and the recommendations from defense together and make proper recommendations. Maybe it is the same. Maybe the chief of the defense wants to make the same recommendations, but they haven't prepared himself into this meeting to make that kind of recommendation, because he also have to consult with those who are involved. So I would make this recommendation, Chair, that we have another session, get the defense force a view on this matter and move from there in a recommendation kind of way.
Thank you, Honorable Hala. You want to?
Yeah, no, I left something, Chair, here.
Okay.
You see, Chair, the people of South Africa only know that we lost 14 soldiers in DRC. They do not know how many soldiers were killed in DRC by our forces. I think, I understand SNDF is not your way of doing things to mention the lost soldiers from the other side, but you need to tell the people of this country so as for them to have confidence on you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable. I'll start with Prof. Hennigan and Dr. Olivier to respond to questions which were asked here. Then we'll give the SNDF and the Secretary for Defense, to say something about this. As these are policy matters, SecDef, and these are centered in your environment as Secretary for Defense. Thank you very much, Prof. Platform is yours.
I think one thing that really comes out quite strongly here is the importance of ex ante and post facto defense oversight. That you've got a critical role not just to be reactive, but also to have an input and overview before. Because most of our oversight, and we have the specialist here next to you, has been post facto So I think that is an important point. Then to answer your question on the core mandate, a decision needs to be made, and there needs to be national debate and decision as to what do we want to use our defence force for. What do the citizens want? What do we need in terms of our constitution? We need those decisions because at the moment we're muddling through. Now the problem that we have, and I'm going to be a little theoretical here again, is that when it comes to civil control of the military, there's, as you know, in the classical Huntington definition, subjective and objective control. Objective control is where the military leadership tells the politicians, I hear what you want me to do, and I'm happy to obey. But this is what is required. Otherwise, we cannot do it. Subjective control is where the politicians, and this is the big issue here, say to the military, you will do this, boys, we don't want to hear no. You will do that. And the Defence Force is saying, well, we can't really, but we'll make a plan. Our Defence Force has been making a plan all the time. And the people who actually have to execute the plan on the ground are dying in the process and are becoming demoralized. So that balance where military leadership needs to take an assertive role and say, tell me what my core mandate is, what is required, I will do the training, prepare, but you provide me with the funding and the equipment. That is where we stand. And as far as I know, the Defence Force has been discussing these things. The Defence Secretariat has been discussing these things. There are the plans, but we need to have bold leadership and acceptance of where we're going because we've got limited resources and we want to know where to. It's like an insurance policy. We would love to insure everything in our house, but maybe your security is more important and your perimeter fence is more important than ensuring your paintings in the house. So what is the priority here? And that needs to be decided. And I'm really quite adamant about this. Your question on moral hazard, which is, if you're going to make that decision to deploy a coercive force against the citizens, are you prepared to carry the consequences of that in terms of the legitimacy of both the government as well as the Defence Force? And have you considered the consequences this has for those who are executing those functions and what the consequences are for them? So that is the moral hazard that we face in deploying a coercive force. Unless there is a clear mandate, clear code of conduct, not like we had during COVID where there was not a clear code of conduct, we're heading for disaster.
Yes, I can maybe just add on the latter about this whole moral hazard thing. Unfortunately, I've been deployed internally and as a soldier, and it is just rife with problematic and moral issues that you want to address. If this decision is made, we will have to be extremely clear about the role and function divide between all the people deployed in this area. Where do they touch? Where do they overlap? And most importantly, who must do what? That is your biggest dilemma in this. This is not the first time that they're deploying the military for gangs and organized violence. And my point is always, soldiers are not policemen with more powerful weapons. We are used for something totally different. What we see in terms of crime and the violence associated with it is not just about the crime. What is the origin of that? It's a socio-economic and cultural problem that has to be addressed. And before the social, economic, and cultural problems are not addressed successfully, you can deploy whoever you want, whether it's a militia, the police, the military, it's not going to solve it. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a festering wound. You have to solve the problem at its core. Otherwise, you will just constantly be clawing this. And in my final work is, our topic of the analysis was the responsibility to protect. And we looked a lot at what is it that the peacekeepers are expected to do, what is it the soldiers that have to do. But I also feel, especially from this committee side, that the responsibility to protect goes also in terms of the protection of the soldiers themselves. Not only physically and equipment-wise, but legally, because are they prepared if you return fire and you kill 5 children whilst executing your jobs? Are the people prepared to do that? And will that soldier who was doing it, because I can tell you, if you start firing, you don't know where that round is going to end up. It's very nice to clinically sit and think, okay, we can do this, but those are the realities of it. Where does that limits come on accountability? So we have also a responsibility to protect our soldiers. Each and every soldier that we spoke to said to us, Colonel, whatever, we want to serve South Africa, we want them to be proud of us, but give us the equipment and the legal mandate to do our job, then we will do it. Thanks.
Thank you, Prof, and thank you, Doc. A cohesive force in a civilian environment, yeah, it's a challenge. I think the SNDF, you hear. Please, let's hear what's your views about all the presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and Co-Chair, honorable members of the House. I also want to echo the appreciation for this presentation. I, however, would like to make few observations, particularly with regard to the research itself. I would like to start off by saying that I feel that the principles of research, I'm not going to claim to be an academic because I'm a soldier and I'm not a politician at the same time. I feel that research must be particularly to solve a problem, which indeed the research problem had been outlined to handle matters that affects our soldiers, because it was focused on what is it that the soldiers have said to the researchers. And that brings me to the second element in the principles that I just want to delve with, the issue of representativity of the population itself. Because whilst we are researching and we feel that whoever must be giving that information must be the one that will at least enrich into solving the research problem. The third issue that I just wanted to comment on before I get into the details of what had been presented is the disinterestedness. I think it is in the domain of the academics that the researcher must at least have that element so as to be able to be objective. So it brings in also the issue of objectivity of the product that will come out of the research itself. The last issue, which is not, my issues with regard to the principles is not exhaustive, but there is an issue of ethics when it comes to research. I really appreciate that after asking the Prof that this report, the presentation is so valuable for those who are affected, being the leadership of the defense. So, fortunate enough, they made a report available to me, which I felt I will have to go study the report, juxtapose it, as Honorable Niels said, that our after-action review and the debriefs, I will juxtapose it with it and milk out pertinent issues that we need to be looking at, because the recommendations that are in this report must also be juxtaposed with what we have picked up on our after-action review. So I really appreciate that we got it. Now, getting into the report itself and the research again, I just want to raise one interesting thing, that the presentation has outlined issues across 4 missions. Although the missions may be noted as peacekeeping missions, but missions are different, unique, and have different dynamics. What we discovered in various reports that we received is that the terrain must be appreciated differently. And at the same time, the DRC, the dynamics in the DRC are different from the dynamics in Darfur. And the dynamics in DRC, in both MONUSCO, which is a UN mission, and SAMI DRC, are 2 different things. And within MONUSCO itself, there are distinct things that the classical peacekeeping forces like India, Pakistani that you referred to in the presentation is different from the mandate that had been given. For the first time that the United Nations had given a peacekeeping force the mandate to be robust and be able to pursue the negative forces on the ground. And thus, the mandate of the FIB differs from the classical mandate that was given to the classical, those people that were doing the peacekeeping. So I just wanted to bring this to the attention of honorable members in this House, that I think it would be much more better if, whilst we come to discuss, yes, generic peacekeeping mission and challenges that are in the missions, there might be commonalities that we need to be looking at, but each mission must be treated, and the debrief and the matters that must be brought to this House must be able to say, hey, look, the National Defense Force had been in Burundi, the National Defense Force had been in Darfur, the National Defense Force had been all over trying to ensure that there is peace. But how then have we quantified the challenges that our people had faced in each and every mission, so as to be able to come with a common understanding to say, I'm not going to talk about the resource issues, because this House had been briefed on several occasions, and we have even indicated the responsibility lies in our politicians that are currently representing us in these 2 committees to say, what type of a defense force do you want to have? And therefore, in all what we do, we have always tried to come and quantify the challenges, and we've made it visible to this House. We had never hidden anything. We have even went to the extent of saying we are preparing a long-term document which we dub Our Journey to Greatness. And in that document, we try to outline all the challenges that we face. We say this is the state of the Defense Force, and this is what we have proposed as a solution to the problems, both in the short term, medium term, and in the long term. So coming back to this House will really not be of any help to try and come and talk about the resource issues. I will just touch on that, because I don't want to be sounding as though this House had done a marvelous work. For us to be able to get a commitment from the Commander-in-Chief, the Commander-in-Chief came and said there will be 1.5% of the GDP that must be dedicated to funding in the budget of the defense. And that was the instruction, and that is what is being worked on. We have had several interactions with National Treasury on that matter. So I don't think I will spend more time on the issue of resources as it had been articulated from time to time. I just want also to come to one point in terms of we value our people. Soldiers, as I say, are the most important assets that we have, because whether you give us money to get equipment, the men behind the equipment, and mark my word, South Africa have exceptional soldiers, disciplined, and they do not lack anything when it comes to what you must expect from them. And I'm a proud commander to be commanding them, because I know they are amongst the best in the world. So what we ask is that whilst we have put our case in terms of we want to be ready, we want to prepare and be employed wherever you want us to go. Because whenever a mission comes to us, the first thing that happens, if it's internal or external, the minister come back as the executive, and the president with the presidential minutes then spell out and inform cabinet on these matters. So we are saying our role remains to be able to take a responsibility in what we are being told to go and do. It is not that we do not make it visible in terms of the resource constraints when missions come. We are conscious of what the size of the cake is. And the fact that we are informed that we are that entity that when told what to do, we then say we will make a plan. And I think, Prof, you stopped short of saying we subscribe to the notion of a Boremaka plan. We've always made to do with within the resources that we have. It is not in our DNA to be defiant. If given a task, we do an appreciation. That now brings me to the issue that was raised, which I am not really sure if I have to dissect what the president had said in the State of the Nation address, because he indicated that he is instructing both the Minister of Police and the Minister of Defense to plan to go and reinforce each other, both in Gauteng and in Western Cape. The last part of that statement was that the SNDF will go and make a plan together with the police and come up with a plan, and the cost of that deployment. So we will continue to make an appreciation, because for us we are not more of the fire brigade. We do an appreciation if a task is given to us. We look at all the factors, and then we look at the courses of actions that we will have to follow. And thereafter, we then bring the plan and we cost the plan. For us, we don't see that the cost of security cannot be the determinant. We say we need to know what is it that is required to defend and protect the RSA. And then you can tell us how you can quantify it in terms of rands and cents. And if the type of the defense that we want is the type of the defense that will be having gaps, then we will be able to come back and say, this is what we are capable of doing, and we have already penned out all those aspects. I think I will stop there, because what I have said is what both the research and honorable members have acknowledged they have heard, they have seen when they went to the borders. And I just wanted to pen out my observation with regard to those matters in that fashion. I so submit, Chair.
Thank you, Chief of the SNDF. I see members have follow-up questions, but what we'll do, I'm going to give the Reserve Council to say something, and then follow up by the Secretary for Defense. And then I'll come back to you, honourable members. Let's start with the Reserve Council. General.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to suggest a correction to the Chair's procedure. I think it would be more appropriate if the Secretariat submits an input, and then you can ask us to say something after that.
Okay, it's fine. I've got no. Secretary for Defense?
Chairperson, thank you. Members, honourable members, thank you. As I said earlier, my name is Nick Sandf, and I'm with my colleague, Mr. Dladler, who is representing the Secretary. Chairperson, rather than addressing Darfur, Mozambique, DRC, etc., I'd like to make a couple of higher order kind of observations, if I may. And I'd like to start out by referring to Section 8 of the Defence Act, which speaks about the function of the Secretary for Defence, and in particular, Section D, Roman 1, 2, and 3. And it says that the Secretary performs functions, in particular those necessary or expedients to enhance civil control, by Parliament over defence, parliamentary committees having oversight of defence, and the Minister over Defence. And I'd like to speak to that mandate of the Secretary in responding. The Chief of the SNF has responded at an operational level to the other matters. Chair, I'd like to maybe just speak about the evaluation of employment, putting the Defence Force into service. What are the kind of thinking and tests that one should have in place? Point one. Point two is looking at the issue of the history and the understanding of internal deployments in South Africa. We have a history of this, a painful history. And then thirdly is to then just make a few points about the future evolution, the plan to move the Defence Force out of where it is into the 1.5% benchmark or thereabouts, as prescribed by the President. Chairperson, if you go to the 96 White Paper on Defence, the 98 Defence Review, the 2015 Defence Review, etc., from a defence policy perspective, it assists decision makers in certain, let's call it tests or evaluation of every deployment that you do. Doesn't matter where it is, if it's internal or external or whatever it is. And that is to evaluate the efficacy of such deployments. Inside the department, that my colleagues will know, we call it the FAS test. It's a very common thing. It's an acronym, FASS. It basically means feasibility, acceptability, suitability, and sustainability. So if one takes a FAS point of view, for every deployment, as the Chief of the National Defence Force said, the Defence Force is employed in terms of the Constitution of the Defence Act and nothing else. And only two people may employ the Defence Force: the President in certain circumstances, or the President or the Minister in certain other circumstances. And it is always done in terms of the executive acts of the President, which includes presidential minutes co-signed by the relevant minister and explanatory memorandum that gets tabled in Parliament. And that is prescribed. But in every deployment, Doesn't matter whether you're sitting at the Ministry of Defence, the Department of Defence, in Parliament, wherever you might be in an oversight or a governance role. If you use that FAS test and test what is before you in terms of, is this feasible? Is it acceptable? Is it suitable? Is suitable as a moral or ethical judgment? And is it sustainable? In other words, can this be done over time and you have the ability to support it, materially, financially, etc. It's always a good test, even for the committee to use. If you go to the Defence Review or whatever document it is, if you go down to basic military doctrine that we teach in the colleges, the test down from that would be the functional attributes of the force. Does it have firepower? Does it have command and control? Does it have maneuver? Does it have protection? Is there intelligence and is there sustainment? Those are the tests you use, and they're common. It's in the global commons. Those are things used. And if you use those kind of things, it helps you to unpack the information before you at whatever level you are. So just from a point of view, that might just be a comment to assist you in going forward. However, on the issue of internal deployments, I'm not speaking about what might be envisaged in the future. I'm speaking on the principle of general principle. Professor Heineken will know that we worked together over many years in the Military Research Group and other entities, where the JMCC, the Joint Military Cooperation Committee, 93, 1994, 95, looking at the formation of the new Defence Force and understanding its role and functions. And in those discussions, we've had many robust discussions about the employment of the Defence Force inside the country, around the world. And the research will show you this. And there's current things happening now in the world where militaries are being deployed internally. It is always a thing you do with the utmost caution. And it's always something that is done with due consideration of the risks and advantages, etc. But if I might just take you to the interim constitution of 1993, because it actually was very instructive in my mind in the functions of the Defence Force. 2271E says that the National Defence Force may be employed for service in upholding of law and order in the Republic in cooperation with the police services under circumstances set out in a law, such as the Defence Act, etc., where the said police service is unable to maintain law and order on its own, etc. And it has always been in all the discussions that the Defence Force always operates in cooperation with the Defence Force, with the police, under own command. And the employment of the Defence Force internally is always necessary and limited. It is very seldom an ongoing matter in cooperation with the police services where it is necessary to maintain law and order. I think that also, I think Professor Heineken and the Chief of the National Defence Force have pointed out that the posture and the doctrine of a peace officer and a soldier are completely different. Their training and orientation is completely different. And that is the thing we have to consider and be aware of, and in the mission preparation, etc. A police or a peace officer and a police officer have a doctrine of progressive force, and they're trained in that way of progressive force, etc. It is completely the opposite of a military force, where a military force uses concentrated force, if not violence, in the short amount of time as possible to achieve an objective. So that's the kind of things we have to consider, and that is always the risk, and you have to ameliorate those risks through measures. But if you look at that 227 of the interim constitution, I checked the constitution now in the current constitution, in its transitional arrangements, 227 was carried over from the interim to the current constitution. It's in the transitional arrangements in the schedules. So it is instructive for us, and there has always been, given our past, we always have been very, very cautious of that when you do deploy the Defence Force inside the country, you always have to do it for the minimum time possible as necessary, so that the police can do their job. It has always been, and that was the history we have all dealt with. Chairperson, as the Chief of the National Defence Force said, we have been doing significant work to have a constructive plan to take the future defence forward. As the Chief spoke to the journey to greatness and the work that we have done on instruction of the President from the 1.5%, and the work that we've been doing with the National Security Secretariat to develop a 30-year force evolution strategy and a plan to plan the milestones of growth of defence with the deliverables, etc. That work is reasonably mature, and I'm sure that the executive authority, in engaging with the executive, will in due course be able to present that kind of work. But we have done significant work to understand how to programmatically develop a campaign to take a financial strategy and an evolution strategy to move us from where we are to 1.5, and what all the waypoints in between, and what's the value proposition increase of every step we take. How do we improve defence for that investment throughout all those things to 1.5 and way beyond that, to the future force we might need in the future. That solid work has been done, it's been modelled, it's been costed and planned. We are refining it as we speak, and I can assure you that the department has applied its mind very robustly to that. Chair, thank you.
Thank you.